Metro on 1019 WDET. I'm Kerry Jr. II, and for Robin Vincent. Last week, Michigan Senator Alyssa Slotkin gave a speech at a progressive think tank.
In 2025, money and opportunity is skewed towards those who already have it, not those who are striving for it. Middle-class families, blue-collar folks, young people, we all can feel that something is off. We're all questioning whether the American dream will be an American reality for us and for our kids.
The senator was ringing the alarm about America's shrinking middle class. She says that it's more challenging for young Americans to become as rich as their parents. For many, housing has become too expensive. Healthcare is too expensive, and a college and graduate degree is also too expensive. Senator Slotkin says that she wants to change that by building more housing, creating a public option in healthcare, and by banning donations from corporate political action committees. That is, she wants to stop money from dominating our politics. Her speech comes at a time when a lot of liberals have been calling on Democrats to create a positive agenda, not to simply stand against President Donald Trump. On Friday, Metro producer Sam Corey spoke with the senator about a plan she hopes will put Democrats on the offense.
Democrats lost the vote to working class people of all different demographic backgrounds in the 2024 election. What went wrong?
Well, in my experience, especially in Michigan, it was just it was a pocketbook election. Inflation was hurting people. People feel like it's harder to get in and stay in the middle class, and they voted their pocketbooks. And I think that President Trump focused almost exclusively on that. And Democrats kind of had a bunch of priorities. And so the average person, I used to knock on people's doors during the election season, and they were like, look, in some cases, like, I'm even a Democrat or I'm an independent, but I just need more money in my pocket. And I think that we've lost focus and need to get back to the basics.
This is a problem that's been growing over time, and I'm wondering what the source of the issue is. Did Democrats and Republicans give corporations too many tax breaks and stop investing in public spaces and public goods? Is it the fact that wages have been stagnating? What caused the problem we have now where people can't afford a middle-class lifestyle?
If you look at it, basically the middle class as a section of American society has been shrinking since basically the 70s, right? A smaller and smaller group of Americans get into the middle class. And that money and power that the middle class used to have, let's say in 1970, 1980 even, a lot of that money has moved up to the wealthiest. And it's a lot easier to have money if you start with money. So I think there are a lot of structural things there, but our job market needs to be, we need to revitalize and think and how we think about the economy, our healthcare system, housing, right? What's more American than buying a house and being on the path to home ownership? Most people are about 40 years old if they're lucky enough to be able to buy that first house. So it's all these things have changed structurally, and our government hasn't changed along with it. Our systems haven't changed along with it. So our parents could be in the middle class, and now it's harder for the son to be in the middle class. So it really needs a big reset, and we need to do that especially because the economy is still changing, right? Artificial intelligence, technology is still changing our economy today. So we were already taking on water as middle class, and now we're about to hit a Category 5 hurricane in the form of artificial intelligence. We got to reset on how we do the basics of government and of our lives and focus on those essential things.
I want to talk a little bit about AI because I think this is important, and I'm not sure how many politicians have plans to protect jobs and expand the middle class while artificial intelligence really comes further and further online. But you were just teasing a little bit of your economic war plan, which you gave in a speech yesterday at the Center for American Progress. You said that the middle class is shrinking and that's America's biggest security threat. Why is that true?
From being first a congressional representative and now a new senator for the state of Michigan, like, you hear about this all the time, right? People will say, well, Dad worked at the auto plant, could afford a fishing cabin up north, and he took us to Disneyland. I have the same exact job, or I have a similar job, and I can't do the same thing. I can't have that fishing cabin up north. Or it's like, hey, I was told that if I played good rules and worked hard, I would do well and my kids would do better. And that just doesn't seem like that still holds true. I was hearing that constantly for years and years. And, I really think that so much of the tension in our country right now comes from economic stress. that when people can't achieve what they thought that, they could achieve, that stability, that economic security, they get frustrated, they get angry, they feel shame, they start wanting to blame other people. And in a country like ours, which is very diverse, if you don't feel like you can achieve what you thought you could achieve, you start blaming other people and turning on other people. And I think a lot of the anger we see in our system right now comes from, people not being able to achieve what they want to achieve. And so you got to get to the root of that issue.
You said yesterday that you have some sacred cows that you want to slaughter. One of them was that Democrats need to be more pro small business and more critical of corporations and corporate greed. Is that fair? Am I reading that right?
Yeah, I think sometimes people sort of think, well, the small business owner is the same kind of character as a billionaire who runs, a major global conglomerate. And I think that that's patently false. Half of jobs in America come from our small businesses, and we want people to live the American dream. We want them to do what my family did. My great grandfather came here at 13 years old, didn't speak the language, worked hard in a slaughterhouse and then a meat packing company, and then worked his way up to own his own business. That's what we want. And I think sometimes Democrats feel like they're anti-business because they're against anyone who really succeeds. And a small business owner is really different than a giant global corporation that's not paying enough in wages and in benefits. And we need to make that distinction and not be sort of anti-success.
So is the key here teasing these two things apart? Because I was interested to hear you say this, because I often hear Democrats being pretty pro small business and increasingly critical of corporations. Is it just that you're trying to sort of explain that there is a difference here and Democrats can and should be pro small business and remain critical of corporations?
Yeah, well, first of all, they have to be more than just saying they're pro small business. There's a bunch of rules and regulations that have been put on, in an overlapping and kind of exhausting way that makes it really hard to start a new business, to get a new license, to get that patent, to pay your taxes, all of these things. So if we really want to be pro small business, we actually have to remove some of the overlapping regulations that are stifling businesses. And by the way, this is I hear this from my business owners in my town all the time. The guy who owns Holly Foods, my grocery store, will walk you through chapter and verse how hard it is just to open up a new grocery store or expand the grocery store. We want that, right, in a rural community. So I think that we need to put our money where our mouth is. And then we, at the same time, need to hold accountable the people who are not playing by the rules, the people who are abusing and exploiting a system. And there's plenty of examples of really big global corporations that are double dipping, right? They're taking tax incentives from the government and then not paying their people enough wages and benefits so that their own employees are on food stamps, their own employees are on Medicaid. So here comes the government again paying those benefits.
I'm glad you brought up rules and regulations because it seemed to be a theme in your speech yesterday. You spoke a lot about how Democrats should care more about outcomes rather than processes. This is particularly true in your speech when it came to housing, where you want to get rid of rules to build more homes, to make it easier to build, which would presumably make homes more affordable. Talk about where Democrats went wrong caring more about rules and regulations than what is actually produced for the American people.
I don't think anyone set out, to say, well, let's overregulate the housing market. I think if you look at each individual regulation that, let's say, a home builder in Grand Rapids has to go through it in order to build a home, each one of those rules, regulations was probably put on with good intentions of protecting people or protecting the environment, protecting taxpayer dollars, whatever it was. It was, I think all of them are well-intentioned probably when they started out, but it's the net effect of all of those regulations piling on top of each other to the point where it takes years to get a permit to do things, or it just becomes so expensive that these home builders are like, I'm not going to build a single family home. I'd rather build a big McMansion and at least make some money out of it. I come from a national security background, and what matters when you're at the Pentagon is results. Like, what is the result? How many more units of housing are you building? Period. Not the, how deliberate was your process?
And so on things like housing, on things like business creation, on things like healthcare access, the more people that have healthcare, the more businesses that are created, the more homes that are actually built. That's what the thing that you want Democrats to be focused on. Is that fair?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, that's why in housing, I said, like, we need 4 million new units of housing in this country. That's how many units of housing we're behind on. And that's why it's so competitive to get a house, so expensive to get a house, because we're behind.
Earlier in this conversation, you talked about artificial intelligence. Of course, there are fears of artificial intelligence replacing jobs. There are a lot of recent college graduates, particularly in the finance and computer science sector, that are struggling to get jobs because AI appears to be replacing them. There's also promises of AI, of increasing medical technology, of finding cures faster. What is your position on AI? What do we need to be doing with this? I don't hear a lot of political leaders having a plan for what to do with AI, and I'm curious what yours is.
So, and by the way, if we weren't all at each other's throats in Washington all the time, I think we'd all be talking about AI more, right? And the rules of the road that need to be put in place around artificial intelligence. Look, it is here. Ask any kid, right? And they're using some version of artificial intelligence, either in the off hours or sometimes now in school, even they're already using it. I did a deep dive on this to try and understand it because I certainly didn't grow up, with artificial intelligence. You need to get your head around it. And it is true that it is going to create a whole bunch of new jobs to the point where, a kid sitting in their basement using artificial intelligence that's getting smarter and smarter can invent the new essential app. There's going to be new patents. All the AI people tell me you're going to need to, quadruple the number of patent officers that can give you a patent because so many people are going to be inventing things from their basement. But the other side of it is there's going to be job loss. Jobs that a college graduate is ready to take on day one after graduation are the ones more at risk. Michigan's used to being the first to be on the list for job cuts, because of bad trade deals or automation. We may actually be more resilient because of our skilled trades. Jobs that need people skills like nurses and teachers are not going away, but that are legal or a first line accountant or a computer programmer. We need to put in rules of the road. We need to completely revamp our workforce training. But there's no doubt about it. What we really need is like a commission of experts to sort of start helping us think through the education piece, the workforce piece. And that's what's not happening right now because Democrats and Republicans are busy bickering.
You're listening to The Metro on WDET. I'm producer Sam Corey, and I'm speaking with Senator Alyssa Slotkin after she gave a speech about her economic war plan at the Center for American Progress. We're discussing that economic war plan and what she thinks the Democratic Party needs to do to win back working and middle class voters. Senator Slotkin, you spoke earlier about partisanship right now and Democrats and Republicans being at each other's throats. There's, of course, a lot of partisanship that is true, and Democrats are in the minority right now. How do you plan to get your economic war plan accomplished? How do you plan to make it popular in a time when it's really hard to get bipartisan support?
A couple of things. First of all, I did this war plan because based on my background in national security, kind of how I approach problems. If something is an existential threat at the Pentagon, you develop a war plan to go attack it. I think the threat to the middle class is that existential. And so this is what I know how to do. No one commissioned me to do it or gave me permission to do it. I think part of what's going on right now is that there's just a lack of ideas, a lack of forward vision. Democrats are playing a lot of defense against Donald Trump and kind of every day focused on that. But any Lions fan or any sports fan in Michigan knows you cannot win something by just playing defense. And I just said, I'd rather put something out that I believe in based on what Michiganders tell me, which is that you need to get back to basics, the things that allow you to live the American dream. Government has the responsibility to set the conditions for success, a successful middle class life. And Americans have the responsibility to work hard to achieve it. It's a deal. It's a handshake deal. And the government's not living up to its side of the handshake.
I want to talk about foreign policy for a second because you have a lot of security expertise in that area. Israel recently attacked Iran. Iran retaliated, and then America has gotten involved. There's now a fragile ceasefire between Iran and Israel. The Senate is expected to vote today on whether to block President Trump from using further military force against Iran because he did not get congressional approval for his attacks. Where do you stand on this vote?
Yeah, just to clarify, the vote that's happening today, I don't know. First of all, it may die by procedure. My Republican colleagues may sort of kill it before it even comes to the floor, just to be straight about it. And then secondly, if it did come to the floor, it's basically a condemnation. It's not preventing any kind of action. It just is sort of after the fact condemnation of not coming to Congress and engaging with Congress on acts of war. You know, for me, I'm someone who's very influenced by the fact that I did 3 tours in Iraq, and I saw what happens when we sort of take military action lightly, think that it's going to be a one and done easy thing, and then 20 years later, you're still in that war. So I think big issues of war and peace should be discussed if we're going to even, risk any Americans' lives in a military action. We should talk about it. So I don't know if it's going to come to the floor. I believe in checks and balances on this system. And so if it does make it to the floor, then I'd be voting for that condemnation. But it was yet to be seen where it's coming out.
Sure. But you think that in order for America to strike another country, you think the president needs to get congressional approval for that?
So the Constitution says if you're in immediate danger, right, if there's a threat to the survival to the American people, a president has the ability to act without waiting for a vote by just notifying Congress. And I don't have a problem with that. I've been on the other side of that. If there's an imminent threat, then that makes perfect sense to me that you've got to act. I think this is a different conversation. This is about taking offensive action as part of, a whole bunch of activities that we're having in the Middle East that have the ability to suck us into a cycle of escalation. And so, yes, I think that the president should have at a minimum come and discussed and debated and consulted on that issue per the Constitution.
I want to stay on foreign policy for a second, again, in part because you have a lot of expertise here. Michigan went the way of Donald Trump in the 2024 election. In part, that was because many Michiganders were upset about the Biden administration not holding Israel more accountable for its attacks on Hamas in Gaza. There are now upwards of 57,000 people that have been killed in Gaza. Many Palestinians are suffering from famine because of aid blockades, and attacks from settlers in the West Bank have ramped up. Do you think Democrats need to do more to hold Israel accountable, like withholding military weapons from that country, and do more to support Palestinians?
Just so we're clear, at this point, the White House, the House, and the Senate are all controlled by Republicans. They control the agenda of what gets to the floor. They control everything. That doesn't mean Democrats don't every single day try to put things out there on this issue and on plenty of other issues in the minority. But if you want to understand what's going on and hold people accountable, right now, the Republicans control it all, the entire apparatus. And I just think that's an important point. So Democrats absolutely have a responsibility to stand up, to say things, to put out bills. We have been voting on bills, I think, the entire 2.5, 3 years since October 7th in Congress on various issues related to Gaza and the West Bank. But I think it's also important to understand who is in charge and who has got the reins right now on this policy, particularly when it comes to people going hungry in Gaza.
I hear you, Senator, but with all due respect, you're putting forward an offensive plan here on the economy and more broadly for the Democratic Party. I'm curious, do you think the Democratic Party needs to do more to hold Israel accountable and do more to support Palestinians?
I think that first of all, I didn't touch, I think, a single word in national security in this speech, and I'll talk more about that in September. But so this was really genuinely focused on domestic economics. I think that in general, there's a major shift going on in both parties on national security. I think Democrats are figuring out what they believe the role of America should be in the world, and so are Republicans, right? The Republicans broke into kind of open warfare about the Iran strike, between the isolationists and those who wanted to do the strike. I think there's a big mixing bowl going on what America's role should be. And certainly President Trump has confused people, I think, the last couple of weeks on what we thought his view was and maybe how that's changing. I think it's changing on the Democratic side. So I think that there's plenty of work to do to figure out what that role should be. And there's no way to get around the fact that what's gone on in the Middle East in the past 2 years-ish has completely, I think, upended for a lot of people how they think about foreign policy, how they think about what our role should be. And people are, in some cases, bowing out of politics or switching parties because of it on both sides. We've seen that on both sides, right? I know, Arab Americans, Michiganders who voted for Trump. Because of frustration over Gaza, I know Jewish Americans who have switched away from the Democratic Party because of their perceptions of anti-Semitism. I mean, I've seen it all, this mixing bowl, especially in our state, because so many people feel so deeply connected to the crisis that's going on in the Middle East. So I think we're in the middle of trying to figure out who we all want to be.
That was Metro producer Sam Corey speaking with Senator Alyssa Slotkin. On Friday, the Senate voted to block a resolution that would have forced President Trump to go to Congress for approval before taking military action against Iran. Democrat Alyssa Slotkin, along with most of her colleagues, voted yes, that Trump should need that approval. Government funding comes and goes, but the voices of Detroit stay strong with your help. WDET is facing serious revenue challenges due to potential cuts being proposed in Washington. To keep the station thriving, we're turning to the real source of power, you. Our goal? 1,000 additional members. Let's stand together. Join now at WDET.org/give and tell a friend while you're at it. Coming up, the Senate narrowly passed President Trump's spending bill. Now it goes back to the House. A key part of that bill is tax cuts. We'll have a look at how President Trump's tax cuts from his first term affected everyday Americans. We'll be right back on the Metro. Stay right there.